Yeah, that looks a lot better than before. Hello, networkers, and welcome back to another episode of Ask the Network Engineer, where I will answer one or many of your questions. And in this episode, we're going to do speed round number 5. And I picked out 5 questions that I want to go ahead and talk about and answer your questions. So let's go ahead and get started. And the first question is by Colin McCarthy, and he asks, is this your home office? Yes, it is. This is definitely my home office for at least 10 years. This is where I've been doing, where I do my consulting work, my and training work that I do. I also have a lab, and the lab is not in here, but I have a rack with equipment all racked up with, of course, Cisco routers, switches, Juniper equipment, Palo Alto networks, that sort of thing. And I do change it out periodically. And I use the lab more as a staging environment where I have projects for clients. I do proof of concepts. Based on customers' environments, I basically can build out the configuration based on requirements of the customer, my recommendations, and then from there I can present the configs to other network engineers to implement. So I do that a lot. Also for design work that I do for customers, or kind of proof of concepts of can this accomplish this kind of a failover redundancy. So I get to do that for customers as well. So so I do access that equipment. It's in a couple of rooms here for my office, and keep it locked up there. But I can of course turn it on remotely here in my office and console in and do what I have to do for it though. But of course, I'm not in there. I'm only in there if I'm racking in new equipment. This table behind me here, this is where I kind of, do like, it's a big open table, and I may kind of go back there and kind of do design work. I also have a whiteboard over there on this side where I kind of do these proof of concept designs, kind of draw it out, talk to the customer with my of course, everybody has one of these, right? So I do some of that and talk to the customers, whiteboarding. But sometimes I go back to my desk there and I kind of draw out designs and start doing prep configuration on paper. A lot of customers also, when they order equipment, it actually comes to my location. And then I go ahead, I configure the equipment. It may be part of my own lab that I do have based on the hardware that is needed. And I configure it, I test it out, kind of do like a validation of that. So that's what that table is usually for. Now for the bigger hardware, like the Cisco Catalyst switches, the 4500 series, the 6800 series, even the Nexus 7000 series type of switches, those are not shipped to my location. I don't have those power requirements for that. So I have other arrangements where I have technicians who basically go on site for the customer. They do the racking, the stacking. We have a terminal router that I get to console in and basically complete that configuration. So the consulting that I do is all remote work. I don't really do a lot of on-site consulting work anymore. I paid my dues. I did that many years ago. I do things remotely now, and that's pretty common for a lot of senior consultants and things like that. But anyway, yes, this is my office, and it's very tidy, and yeah, I'll be doing this forever. And question number 2 is by, let me move this aside here, is by Britt Nicole. And he says, I like your channel and watching your videos. Thank you and welcome to my channel. It means a lot. Could you tell me how I can get network engineering experience without having a real networking experience? I'm stuck here and I don't have any jobs yet. Thanks. So if you're new to this channel and you're watching this video for the very first time, I recommend going to the very first episode 1, and watch all the videos in sequence. Okay. And I give a lot of information, a lot of resources and things to consider in regards to, for you, Britt, really, some of that information. And I wrote some notes down, but specifically to help you with your answer though, in terms of how can you gain some experience, and kind of put that on your resume to give you ammunition, better chances of getting a network engineering position. So some of the episodes that you should definitely check out is episodes 10 through 15. I did like a 6-part series about applying for jobs and basically the process for that. So it's a very good series. Go ahead and check that out. There's also episode 4, which talks about network opportunities. There's episode 23, where I continue to talk about network opportunities and what you can do to gain experience. And also check out episode 3, where I talk about help desk and basically eventually moving up to be a network engineer. So check out those episodes. If you're starting out in networking and you are in a similar situation where you want to try to gain real experience and put that on your resume so you can eventually become a network engineer. And question number 3 is by Fatal Framestar 15. Hope I said that right. And he asks, I have a question about routers and the best setup to acquire the best service out of a router. My question is, in your opinion, what is the best router for a large number of people, such as 9 people, to use while they also have wireless cameras going off of the same router? So before I get started, let me talk about terms of classifications for the number of users. Okay, so different engineers will have their different numbers of how they classify what is considered as a small network, a medium, and a large network. Okay, and this is something I've been following for several years. It's also in the Network Design Cookbook. And I'll try to find the actual picture and I'll put it within the editing here. You can see that very quickly. So that within that particular image there, a SMB size environment is typically between 20 and 250 users. That's typically a SMB, and SMB stands for small medium business. It means that they're not small, but they're not medium either. They're basically in between. And most networks, most companies do fall into the spectrum there. Okay, so again, there's SMB. After that, you have medium-sized networks, and that's typically between 250 and 1,000 users. So I worked in a couple environments that had that number of people, and I designed accordingly based on those number of users. And then after that, of course, you have enterprise. You have the large size networks, which is basically 1,000 plus users. There's also very large, which is basically tens of thousands of users, and that's something that should also be considered. And the reason why I say that the classification is important is that you should pick hardware that is typically designed for the size of that business. So now in your case, you're talking about 9 people. So based on that same scale here of SMB, medium, and large, any environment with less than 20 people is considered as a small business network. Smaller than that, like 2 or 3 people, that's typically called a SHOHO, a small office, home office. That's what that stands for. So you need to find a particular device that is intended for a small business network. And there's a lot of great options out there intended for small networks that can provide being a router, a firewall, even have wireless integrated within it, which is great. And one of them is my favorite, the FortiGate. It is a next generation firewall that can provide next generation filtering of applications, URL, files, things like that. Very, very good. And it has a model that has wireless integrated within it. So you can consider that. On the Cisco side, there's the ASA 5506, and that runs the firepower services, which means that you can turn that device into a next generation firewall. And that has a lot of great capabilities in there, like basically filtering, malware, websites, application, file blocking, you name it. All these next generation firewalls do the same thing anyway. But the one of the great things about the ASA 5506, or basically the firepower product line, is that it has something called security intelligence, which is basically dynamic access controls. That's a very strong feature that is really good in that product line. So that's a great service to have on that particular device. Plus, if I'm mistaken, I don't think so, but there is a particular model that does support wireless for the ASA 5506. So you can definitely check that out and consider that. And another one I'll pick on is SonicWall. SonicWall has always done this for a long time. They have their TZ series. They have many different kind of models that they actually have. And SonicWall is kind of intended for small and SMB sized companies that want affordable security. And of course, SonicWall has appliances that has wireless integrated as well. So I would recommend checking those products out and get more details. But from my recommendation, what I recommend to all of my small size customers, I mean, I have a couple of them though, I don't pick and I don't say, oh, I only do enterprise. No, I help customers build networks. I don't care if you're small, SMB, medium, or large. I have all those customers, but I don't really just, I don't say I don't do small. I do what the customer wants. I like networking. I like taking care of the customer. So I recommend for my small size customers the FortiGate firewalls. They're very affordable. They have a great user interface, great features, everything. So a lot of information, but just start with that for which one you can consider for your environments or for your small size customers. Okay, moving along. Question number 4. And I just realized I'm wearing a Hello Kitty Band-Aid. I cut myself and my daughter. That's all we have is Hello Kitty Band-Aids. Okay, back on point. Question number 4 is by Naresh, and he asked, I see that most of the high-paying jobs in networking are in the US. Well, it depends where you go in the US. I've seen the episode of yours where you mentioned locations equals more jobs, or basically the best locations can give you more job opportunities. I wanted to know what kind of skill sets in networking, please explain detailed technical skill sets, is deficient in the US. So definitely check out a particular video. I have to check what episode number that was. But check out episode 23 where I talk about valuable networking areas. Check out that video. I explain everything in terms of what is valuable, in terms of areas that people are looking for. And I also talked about in episode 8 about key technologies. So check out those 2 episodes on this channel to get more information about that. But the short answer is data center and security. Data center and security are very big levels that people are looking for those individuals. Because we're living in a time of cloud computing. Everything is being pushed up to the cloud. Companies are basically becoming MSPs. So they're looking for people who know how to build data centers. All of my colleagues that I talk to who are consultants or who work in other companies, they do data center work. They pay a lot of good money, especially if you know storage. I have a friend of mine. He's a storage engineer. Wow, he gets paid some really, really good money. But that's part of the data center kind of engineering track. So again, check out those 2 videos to get more information in regards to what are valuable key areas that you should consider in the networking field. And the last question that I want to cover or answer is by Kendrith Davis. And he says that he recently discovered our videos and he enjoys them, finds them very helpful. Thank you very much. His question is about how much job responsibilities change from mid-level engineer to a senior network engineer. So that's a very good question. And before I can even explain what a senior role typically does, let's kind of start with the beginning and says, what does a typical entry level or a junior network engineer, what do they typically do? And then we can work ourselves up to a senior position and those responsibilities. So a junior network engineer or an entry level, they typically do things like they rack equipment, and that's good exposure for them. They also do cabling, it all depends on the environment. Larger the environment, they have their own data center technicians. And these are people that focuses on the facilities of like the power, the cooling, installing the racks, the cabinets, and that also includes cabling. So in large environments, they have those kind of individuals. But in some environments that do have a junior network engineer, they could be involved with the cabling and racking the equipment, but also with very basic configuration, like adding, like putting interfaces into particular VLANs or configuring interfaces with the appropriate IP address and subnet mask and doing a no shutdown. They also do very basic troubleshooting, like if a circuit is down to a remote site, like the internet is down, they typically call the ISP and they open up a ticket and they troubleshoot to make sure that they can access that site or that internet services are working again. So those are typically what a junior person does. For a mid-level network engineer, they typically do more of the deployments of not just basic configuration, but they're configuring, like they're adding the VLANs, they're configuring distribution switches, edge routers, maybe some access switches with the assistance of the junior person if that person does exist. Most companies just have a network engineer. There's no senior, there's no junior. They're just a network engineer. So basically they do all of it. But so they do those kind of deployments of deploying the actual network, but they're also treated as escalated support. So if there's a particular issue that the junior person is working on and they can't resolve it, it typically escalates to that mid-level engineer to do more further troubleshooting, which will involve doing debugs, running particular commands of doing routing operations, probably even doing just basics of trace routes as well, right? So that's what a mid-level typically does. They deal with more of the next advancement of deployments, configuration, more of the enriched configuration compared to what a junior person typically does. And we get to a senior position. And there's pretty much four main things that really change or in terms of what your responsibilities are. So number one, you become more of the team lead. Now that may not be your official title, but you are managing a group of other network engineers. I've done that a lot. I was part of a team with engineers. I was a senior person, so I mentored the other mid-levels and junior people for the various tasks of the project. If we were deploying like a data center network or remote sites, you're basically leading your team for what they're going to be configuring and that sort of thing. So that's what happens for one of your responsibilities. You also get involved with more of the advanced configuration. So if the mid-level does distribution switches and edge routers and things like that, and the junior network engineer does like access switches, maybe a couple of branch routers, the senior person does more of the backbone routers, the core switches that deals with the BGP configuration on the edge. That's more of a senior kind of responsibility. Depends on the environment, of course. Just keep that in mind. Okay, but they do more of the advanced kind of implementations that typically happens. And yes, they're also treated as a next level of escalation that may happen to them. Okay, so that's something else. Another thing that they do a lot is with design work. So the senior person does the network design of building out what the network's going to look like by listening to different project managers, listen to the desktop users, the application specialists, the system administrators, the business owners. You're listening to all these individuals and you're getting their requirements and you are basically building the design for what the network will be to meet those requirements. And then from there, you're determining what the hardware will be, okay? And of course, from there, you will start doing what is called a build of material, a BOM. And that basically means that you're going to like a reseller. And that means that you're going to likely work with a sales engineer. And basically, you're going to tell them, I'm looking for this hardware. And you're going to get pricing for that. And you probably get your manager involved to figure out what the pricing will be. Yay, fun stuff there. But that is part of the responsibility, if that's what your job role could be, though, is the design, but also doing the build of materials and determining the actual hardware. So those are some of the main responsibilities that you would typically do as a senior network engineer. And it's not really much of a learning curve because, doing a design, even is very simple, is not that complicated. It's just a matter of, okay, we're building out a internet edge solution. Okay, great. So we know that requires an internet cloud. We know that requires edge routers. Okay, that's easy enough, right? Then you figure out, well, what kind of services we'll be implementing on there. What about redundancy? Do we need redundant clouds, things like that? Do we need BGP, which means do we have our own IP, our own public IP space that we want to advertise to have more reachability if one ISP fails? So these are things that you're going to kind of figure out, and really from there, you will determine the best hardware based on the bandwidth requirements, the interfaces, and other kind of conditions like that. And from there, you can determine who on your team is the better fit for configuring this router or this switch or things like that. That's kind of what the team lead actually does. So it's not much of a big learning curve, because when you get to that level, you're already doing some of that already there. It happens very gradual, and before you know it, you're doing design work. You're doing bill of materials. You're doing escalator supports. You're doing advanced configuration. It just happens. And it just happens that then you just fall into that role as a senior person. So anyway, to answer your question, those are some of the things that you would typically do in that role. And congratulations for reaching that role. And we are done with this episode. So thank you very much for the great questions. And always, I want to hear from the rest of you guys. So if you have any questions about being a network engineer or anything in the networking field, leave those questions below in the comments, and your question will come up in a future episode or speed round on this channel. So thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe to our channel. That means a lot. And also check out our practical training on our website at routehub.net and support the training that we provide for network engineers and consultants. And until next time, keep networking.